PayPal, please. Keep us on the air. And we're talking today about authoritarian governments. And many politicians around the world, and of course our Prime Minister says so, that governments are becoming more authoritarian. And that's bad. My point is that I think that this government is probably the most authoritarian government we've ever had. But let's ask Dan McTeague. He was a Liberal member of Parliament for 19 years. And it seems that in some countries in Europe, they are becoming more authoritarian. But do we have a case of governments saying, look out for those bad guys, while at the same time practicing what the bad guys do?
Well, maybe we should ask Google. Maybe we should ask Facebook. Look, if you're trying to point fingers and say we're left, they're right, they're wrong, you ultimately have those fingers pointed right back at you. And I think for the Canadian position, the government of Canada take the idea that somehow it's not authoritarian is a little bit of a stretch. This is a government that doesn't like to, well, parliamentarians who like to do their hybrid. They don't like to show up for work, have a little bit of fun on the side. But more seriously, when you have seen examples of how the government responded, and in many respects unnecessarily, to the convoy, as it appeared in Ottawa. I think that's a grave concern to people, especially those of us who were around in 1981-82, saw Pierre Elliott Trudeau on the dais with Queen Elizabeth, my minister, Paul Cosgrove, Tom Pitfield, and others, signing the Constitution, saying those freedoms are entrenched, they're enshrined. They can't be compromised. And in one stroke of a pen, one decision by the government, they were. But I think I go back to my point about C-18. You have a heritage minister who pushed this on the belief that he could somehow get money, extort money from these very large social enterprises. And instead, now we find ourselves circumscribed in terms of providing information I think Canadians valuably need. And so for that reason, authoritarianism is a pretty tough word, but it can swing, that pendulum can swing both ways.
Well, we do have a government, and let's just talk about authoritarianism, but also talk about intervention. This government is not afraid, and in fact wants to get its fingers into virtually everything, whether it be business, industry, communications, newspaper business.
Yeah. I think there's a point at which you have to recognize the state has its role and has its limits, but too much can also discourage the kind of productivity, the kind of efficiencies, the kind of nascent idealism that I think is very much a part of Canada. Business in particular are finding it very difficult, taxed to the yin-yang, regulated to the yin-yang. The point is, I think for a lot of people, Canadians believe very, very strongly in the idea of freedom and yet don't recognize, perhaps appropriately, just how much many of those freedoms are being eroded, not just in their own personal lives, but in the lives of those around them and who were most affected.
So how is that happening if people don't know it? If you're saying that freedoms are being eroded, I believe that to be the case. But if you mention that, some people say, oh, you're just some wingnut. Of course we don't have freedom.
Well, of course they're going to say that, but that's because they probably have a vested interest in saying that. And I think everyone has an angle here. But for those out there who know Canada, know our institutions, know our pursuit of democracy, and know our international reputation, things have come down a long way.
True words, never speak. 3 minutes. I know that many of you viewers are experiencing tough times with those pointless Trudeau taxes. You're watching every dollar, so are we. We run a very lean operation, which is why I'm asking this question of you now. If you know of any companies who want to advertise on this station, good people watch it, as you know, from coast to coast to coast. Please let us know. And in the meantime, please subscribe and PayPal.